I'm some leader of PlayerData, the company. I know a lot of faces in here. Thank you guys for coming out. We're going to hear from Carly today. This is really about you guys learning about how Carly thinks, how Carly works. Carly is one of the sports scientists here at Atlanta United. She runs pretty much this whole place. I wish it was not the case.
It's a compliment.
It's a compliment. But by herself, the entire Youth Academy is using different types of performance technologies. All questions, are on base. Don't be too personal over there. And Carly's going to tell you a little bit today about how she does her job, how she thinks about player development, how she uses GPS, and then we'll have some lunch and we'll actually head out to the fields, and a couple people will do a little demonstration of a couple of the different technologies Carly's using, and you guys can actually try it out, see it on your own phones, and kind of get an example of what she's been talking about. Cool. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Carly. I don't run the place. I would never sleep if I ran the place. There's too much to do. Again, my name's Carly. I'm the head of performance here. So for our developmental teams, I oversee all things medical, strength and conditioning, nutrition, and specifically GPS for our 2s all the way down to our U13s. So that includes 6 teams, total of 130 athletes. So a lot of work to be done. One thing that has been really, really amazing from our owners, just to start, I don't know if you guys saw the news, obviously US Soccer just moved here. Arthur Blank made a major contribution to them. He also added a $23 million training ground expansion. So we're gonna basically double the size of this whole campus. This whole grass area is gonna be a new building. We're gonna add a couple new fields, a lot more parking. So I apologize if anyone had to park down the road. But that has been a major contribution from our owner of their investment into the developmental space. That whole new building is all for the developmental side. So the first team will not set foot in there. It's truly just for all the teams and staff that work on our side of the building. So with that being said, one of the biggest contributions that Arthur and the ownership has made towards their support for what we do in our work is investing in PlayerData. Before we started with PlayerData, we had 3 teams on the developmental side wearing GPS units, our 2s, our 17s, and our 15s, which are our MLS Pro Pathway teams. After we ended our contract with them and switched to PlayerData, we now have all 6 teams wearing GPS pods. So that is very, very important for us, specifically in the MLS structure, to see the progression of team to team and age to age. I'm not going to dive into that too much today. Unless you guys want to know more, feel free. No question is off limits. So if anything that I present raises a question, feel free to ask. But again, this has been a major contribution from our ownership and from our executives of how much they want to support us by investing in this specific company. So without further ado, we'll get started. Everything that you're going to see in here is live data from our true players. I have no issue sharing any data with any of you guys. This is, unfortunately, if you guys follow along with our 2s team, we did get pumped on Monday night by Philadelphia Union. So this is a live video. What I'm going to show you is basically we're going to go through the download process, how long it takes me to make a training report, and then how long it takes me to cut that training report into segments. So something that we'll do, which again, I'm not going to go into super big detail unless you guys want to know more about it, is everything we do for the 2 specifically is going to be based on a drill library. So I'm sure you as coaches and directors have specific drills that you guys love to do, love for your coaches to do, and you maybe want to know how hard was that drill? Did the guys sprint enough in that drill? What was the space of that drill, and did it achieve what we wanted to achieve? So with this, I'll show you guys this. I'll say, point blank, I was talking with Brian right before this started, none of what I'm going to say is bullshit. I promise. I could not be a bigger fan of this company. I've worked with Catapult, StatSport, and Player Tech in this company. This is not even, I guess it's free advertising, but I mean every word. It's been by far the best GPS company we've ever worked for. So I do have a little bit of bias here, but that is from the bottom, honest part of my heart. So we're going to go ahead and play it. If you guys want to start your stopwatch, no problem. This is the ease and simplification of how long it takes to download a training session. This was our active recovery session yesterday with our 2s players. This is live. Should have started my watch. Start it now. This is all done from my smartphone. So this is just a screen recording of my cell phone. Data is downloaded. Now I'm going to make a new training session. forgot Aiden at the top. Didn't want to exclude him from the session. Training session is made, the data is now downloading and cutting for those players, and then now I'm going to segment it for our drill library. There's an activity graph at the top. That's what these lines are. You can tell it's a live video because I got an email. And you can cut, if you want to cut your session, you can see where the breaks are per the drill. In the activity graph, you don't really need to know that. We just do stop-start time on a piece of paper while we're out there. When you have live tracking, you can do it that way as well when you're out on the field. One more segment, our coaches love to train. Training segmented. Go back to the overview, little refresh, and then all of our data is there for the day. The button at the bottom right, plus button, get my report, and now my report is automatically sent to me. I started my stopwatch a little late, but that was under 3 minutes. So when we first were at the club, when I first started here, we were partners with Stat Sport. And Brian just asked me, with the 3 teams that we had, how long would it take me to download the data, cut the training, and send out a training report that was not automated for us. On average, for our 3 teams, it took me about 5 hours. So my first 2 years here were pretty long years for me. This now takes me, for all 6 teams, under 45 minutes. So for us, it has been incredibly simple, incredibly fast, and incredibly accurate. That is the 3 things that I believe data should be, first and foremost. It's very simple that I've shown this to my mom, who knows nothing about data or sports in general, and she gets it. It's incredibly fast, it cuts my work rate down an unbelievable amount, and it's accurate. So a fun story that I like to tell about PlayerData is my boss, Ryan, who's our director of high performance, is incredibly picky and a bit anal, honestly, about how accurate our data is, because the coaches at that level and the coaches at any level, if you're making decisions based on the data, you don't want to be wrong, right? No one wants to be wrong, especially when you're talking with parents, especially when you're talking with players. The data has to be accurate. So before we agreed to sign with PlayerData, we made them come out here for a week-long trial where they basically did a validation testing for a week long. So they came out with standardized exercises. There was, I believe, a group of 5 or 6 engineers, and every day they're out there for about 7 or 8 hours with a Stat Sport pod on and a PlayerData pod on, and they did the exact same drill. Every single one of them did the exact same drill, standardized drill. They did it every day for a week. They compared the data and they found a less than 1% error rate. So there was less than 1% difference between the product we were previously using and the product that we now use. We now cover all 6 developmental teams for about half the price of what we were using before. So it is very accurate, it is very simple, and it is very fast. Another great thing that we love about it is the cloud dominance. I oversee way too many teams to be able to travel events. I know some of you guys in here are directors, you cover a lot of teams, you have a lot of people in a lot of different places in the world. We previously just got back from Generation Adidas Cup, which was down in Florida. I had 2 fitness coaches travel to that event to cover our 2 teams that were there, while I stayed here with our 2 teams and working with different return to play athletes. While they were there, they were able to download all the data, cut all the data, and make all of our match sessions for me here to then analyze that data based on the previous data set that we were working with and then give to our coaches. This was me in Atlanta at the time with all of the traffic that is normally seen in Atlanta. That's actually a pretty good day. So something that I love about it is, again, because we cover so many teams and we have so many moving pieces, if we have to make decisions, if parents are calling us about why their kids aren't playing, if we have athletes complaining about why they're tired or why they're fatigued or why they didn't play enough, everything that we can be done is from a centralized location. I never have to travel, which is a great perk to my job because of the ability of the cloud dominance. So our previous competitors that we were using, we wouldn't get any data for the week because the cloud just wasn't efficient enough for us to use to make decisions in live time. So that is a phenomenal thing that we love about it, and something that our staff also loves. Everyone that is on our staff knows how to use PlayerData. They love PlayerData, and it's very, very easy and simple for them to use. Going through my daily workflow and what that looks like. So these are the pods. It's very, very simple. It's about 5 steps. These are the pods we turn out and we set on. Every pod has a LED light, which is a very, very cool thing for us in terms of just how it looks. It looks professional, it looks sleek, it looks clean. That's very important for our athletes who don't want a bulky pod on their back. They already will sometimes resist wearing them just because of the culture of where they come from. Our Latin Americans who have never heard of GPS units in their entire life resist all the time, but once we show them these pods, they're like, oh, that's pretty cool. They don't even feel it. So pods are tiny, they're very slim, they're not bulky at all, and it comes with an LED light on the front that has a number, and then you can do initials. So if you do team number, jersey number, whatever it is. We turn on the pods, we set them out for the players, go out to the field, the coach or the fitness coach, just whoever's out there first when the players arrive, they'll put the pods in their back or they'll just tell them to put them in. At the professional level, we like to put them in so we know that they are turned on and placed the correct way, but whoever's out there will put them in the vest. After that, after training's done, if you don't want to use live tracking, no problem. We'll collect the pods, we'll come back and we'll do the download process, which I just showed you. Very, very fast. Do the download process. Everything is done on my smartphone too, which I love. So if I'm down here training or if I'm down here watching a session, I get a text from my coworker, hey, pods are inside, perfect, download, boom, training session's done within 5 minutes. Can send that out automatically. The sports staff member then will create the training session like I just showed, segment the session if you like. If you don't like, no problem, and then an automated report is sent to us. That was one of the most important things for us when we decided to partner with this company, was I did not want to be copying and pasting data into an Excel sheet. I don't have time for that. I have too many teams for that and way too many players. Like I said, 130 players, and I'll get into next the 5 metrics that we track. So what is that, 650 metrics? That's a lot of copying and pasting. It's way too much. And then looking step number 5, that is when once the training session is downloaded, I will talk with the coach about any type of modifications we need to make, how the training session was, how we can prepare for the next one, whether it's a match, any type of review that we need. Very, very simple daily workflow, like I said, was under about 45 minutes. Any questions so far? Okay, I must be doing great. Next, we're not going to dive too much into the detail of today because I don't want to overwhelm you all. I have specific work that we've done if you want to get into the higher detail of a little bit more of the nitty gritty and what we do. The main thing is I want you guys to know just how simple it is to use. There are 3 to 5, depending on how you want to calculate them, main metrics that we use. 5, that's it. I think one of the best things is, as a sports scientist, you can dive into hundreds of metrics, right? It's never ending. The detail, the depth, it's all there. Frankly, we don't ever look at more than 5. We don't need more than 5. If you add max speed on here, that's 6. But there are so many ways just to get lost in the data that all we want are 5 super reliable things that we can depend on every single day to make decisions. And that's it. We don't need any more than that. That's something I think sets PlayerData separate from the rest of the market, is they don't get lost in the overwhelming details that no one really cares about, or that no one has the ability to go into detail for to really understand. Looking at the 5 main metrics that we use, the first one is going to be total distance. I'll go through this chart in a second. Obviously, the 2 sides are highlighted. Total distance, as I'm sure most of you know, is just the total meters covered per exercise, training session, or match. It helps us give an understanding of the ground covered per player as well as tactical efficiency. How are you in your starting position? Are you having to run 100 yards back because they broke your press? What are the ways that our guys are covering ground? Are they being efficient or not efficient? Again, those are just simple questions that we like to ask, but again, nothing that I would expect any of you to have to dive into detail with. Obviously, less positional starting port corrections will lead to lower total distance. There's different applications that we can apply here. This mainly just helps us to monitor overall volume. Truly, the 3 big questions we want to ask: how much work did our guys do? How fast did they run? And how much did they run fast? What was the distance of how fast they ran? That's really the 3 big things that will help us move forward. The next one, high-speed running, zone 5 and zone 6. This is going to be most important for our external players. So if you think about total distance, that'll be mainly incorporative for our central players because they have to cover the most ground, especially in a transitional match. Against Philadelphia Union, our central midfielders and central players covered a lot of ground because, as we know, Philly's very direct. Same thing with New York Red Bulls. We knew it was going to be a very high physical total distance game for them, as well as high-speed running because of the nature of the opposition. So high-speed running is just a sum of the distance covered at different in high-speed zones. You guys can set this based on your athlete population of if you want it absolute or relative. That is something that PlayerData has created, the ability to manipulate however you want that to be. Absolute is going to be typically the industry standard is 5.5 to 7 meters per second. That's the zone 5. That's one metric, and then zone 6 would be greater than 7 meters per second. Again, not that super important for you guys to understand. That's just the absolute thresholds. This would be our argument for why we use absolute thresholds is because within each team, we have similar physical profiles within our teams because of our style of play and the players that we recruit to play here. So someone running at 7.2 versus 7.3 doesn't make much of a difference when both of their max speeds are 8.5. If you have a player on your team like I did in college where, let's say my max speed was 8 and my teammate's max speed was 9.5, it's way different if we're both running at 7.2. So the application of that and how that affects how intensely they're doing and how physically they're performing is a big indicator. So I would say it's going to be all based on your athlete population of whether you want that to be absolute or relative. This again will be key for our external players, so specifically to monitor for our wingers because of the nature of the position that they're playing in the field. There's not as many obstacles. They are just freely running up and down. That's really all they need to do. Our central players are going to be mainly monitored using XLs, DCLs. Because there's more obstacles in their way, there's not enough time or space to gain enough speed to enter a high-speed running threshold. So because of all the obstacles, this is going to be a big one, sorry, I don't want to get in the way, that we monitor for them. The XL, DCL, you can again set the metric of the speed threshold that you want. For us, the industry standard again is greater than 3.5 meters per second. So I'm changing pace really fast or I'm slowing down really fast. That's really the most simplistic way to look at it. And then what is the obviously physical demand of those things and how it affects the body. Yes?
Why do you, like, there's some folks in the room, maybe their first time even thinking about data.
Yeah.
You talked about how you use total distance,
Yeah.
what you use it for. What do you use high-speed running for? Like, let's say all these coaches are coaches of club teams.
Mm-hmm.
Why use high-speed running? How can that help them? And why use XLs, DCLs?
Yeah. So great question. High-speed running for us is just going to see how much a player sprints, essentially. How much are you sprinting and how long are you sprinting? We can get into the physical details. We don't need to. But this is also going to replicate just match intensity. Was our match intense or was it not intense? The way that I like to explain it is if I give a player a source of caffeine, I would rather give them a shot of espresso than a cup of coffee. They might both contain the same amount of caffeine, but the amount that they're receiving that in is reduced. So if I want my player to play for 20 minutes on the field, and that gets 2,000 meters of total distance, I want them to sprint 20% of that 2,000 meters versus total distance. If you don't have the high speed running in there, great, you covered 2,000, you covered 3,000. That doesn't really give us an indication of how intense that dosage was. So if we're all running a mile, which of us can sprint half the mile and which of us sprint a quarter of the mile? That's the application for us of, are we actually playing intense or are we just kind of running around, jogging around, not playing at the level that we would like to see in a match compared to match intensity? XLs, DCLs is going to be specifically for tight spaces. So obviously there's a lot of tactical implications to this. If you think about the press and where you are in terms of territorial dominance, if our press was in the opposition's half, we shouldn't really be sprinting because the ground that we're covering to go step to a player is not going to give us enough speed to gain any type of high speed. It should just be a short acceleration, a short burst to get there. Same thing with a decel. If I'm going out to press super, super hard, am I decelling quick enough for them not to beat me off the first touch? Am I getting out there and closing ground fast enough to where they can't just dribble around me? So those specific applications of this is going to be for very, very tight spaces, which is why I said it's very important for our central players because they are naturally going to be in tight spaces on the field, whereas high speed running is going to be specific for our wingers. Again, everything that we can do is based on match intensity, which again, we can get into that at the end, but these two big ones will be for intensity in related to the match. Does that make sense? Okay.
Sorry, the second part is you manage the whole player development pathway or use their team to do whatever they learn in MLS Pro.
Yeah.
you have like sets for each one? And when you think about like recruiting or moving players, how do you think about how they're ready to move up or ready to get to the next level?
In terms of like progression?
Progression,
Yeah. So we have, basically we have match standards and then individual standards. So everything that we do, and granted this, if your club doesn't follow this pathway, it's totally fine. Everything we do is based off the first team. So we look at what the first team standard is for every performance. If we're playing the same style of play and if we have the same game plan and if we have the same match intensity, that is what we're trying to simulate. We're trying to get players from where we are onto that field out there where they're playing right now. So if that is our standard, everything we do works backwards from that. So it was a great question. I was talking with Brian about this as well. We will have match averages for all of these things. So in an Excel sheet, they'll also have it in PlayerData. I believe it's stored in there. What are the match averages when we played Philadelphia, New York Red Bulls, Carolina Core, all these teams, and how do our matches per age progress up to the first team level. So is a first team central midfielder covering 11,000 meters of total distance a game? Why are our twos players only covering 8,000 meters a game? What is the drop off there? Because we want to know, is it going to be a massive physical jump from one level to the next, if that makes sense? So everything that we do is based on progression. So we can have match averages, we can also have individual averages. There are some players right now on our twos team who are far exceeding their positional average on the first team. That is something that is great for us. Let's not get him injured and let's push him on his way. There are players who we have considered signing to a twos contract from our 17s who are physically nowhere near it. So that's a major risk and liability on our part to put them in that environment knowing they are going to just physically get dominated and or get injured. So everything we do is going to be based on is going to be around the matches and then looking at what is the progression from age to age up to our first team. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So this is just an overview of what you're going to get for each training session report. This is the automated one that'll get sent to your inbox after you make a training session report. The reason why I love this, even if you don't have the segments, this is all you need to know in order to do anything in the GPS data world. You can go down a billion different rabbit holes. You can look at 100 different metrics. These 9 are really all you need. That's why I love this training report. We used to have a way more complex training report. PlayerData showed us this one. We were like, perfect. That's all we need. So your total distance is going to be in the left-hand corner, your high intensity running, which is your zone 5, and then your sprint distance, which is your zone 6. So the way I interpret this, very simply, high intensity running is like, okay, I'm running pretty fast. Sprint distance is, okay, I'm sprinting my ass off. Those are the two different kind of how I categorize them. Your XLs and your decels are down here. Top speed, number of sprints, and then meters per minute, which is just total distance divided by minutes that you're on the field. So this is, again, all you need to make a decision. It's very simple. It's very clean. Ryan and I worked hours on building a training report for our coaches 2 years ago. We showed them the PlayerData one, and they immediately were like, no, we want the PlayerData one. We don't want your fancy numbers. We don't want your charts. We don't want your graphs. We just want this. This is all we want. This is all we need to see. So it saved us a lot of time. It was a little bit of dagger to the ego, but it was totally fine. The segment on the right is going to have all the breakdown of what you did for that day, as well as what each average and total was for the session. So again, very simplistic report. It's all you need in order to make decisions. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm getting old. I cannot see really well. But I have a question. We have some heart rate monitor involved with.
We currently, the club does not. We had one in the past and it did not sync with the GPS units that we had, so we stopped using them, the heart rate monitors.
So the GPS does not have a heart rate monitor?
I don't believe right now. Yeah, I don't believe right now.
GPS doesn't have heart rate monitor. What we're finding is, just like Carly, a lot of people are stopping using heart rate. I don't know, Buddy, if you want to take that one.
Just with it is because of 2 sensors, the reliability of the players to correctly wear a strap at times, it becomes unreliable data. It's like you have poor connection between the 2 devices, or it starts to fall down during a match. I've had several players in the past just throw them off. So at times when you're trying to be consistent with data, it becomes inconsistent and unreliable. So if we know within the interval nature of training that we can still kind of lift what we prescribe from a physical standpoint, we know we can get some of that outcome that
How do you guys measure internal load?
Internal load.
How do you measure the internal load?
PSC, is that what you said?
Yeah, like some questions to see how the athlete is feeling. Because the heart rate gives you the
Yeah.
internal load.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you don't use internal load as a heart rate monitor, how do you check the internal load for the athletes during the sessions? Do you have some strategies?
Yeah, we do RPs at the end, so we can break down the RP in 3 ways. We do a breathing RP, so like how hard were you breathing? Do you feel like cardiovascularly you were not fit enough? We have a physical RP, so there's 3 parts to it. Physical RP, like how heavy are your legs, how fatigued are your legs, how sore are you, stuff like that after the session, and then a cognitive RP, so how mentally draining was the session for you? Do you feel like you had a lack of focus today? Was the concept that we introduced over your head, was it too complicated? That's how we typically measure after the session for those kinds of things. Something that I personally will do, which again, it's not super complex, but a lot of what we do, especially when it starts heating up, how much of the water are you drinking? Is our AT refilling the water bottle after every set, or are you guys not touching the water? What's your breathing rate? Is your chest flying through your shirt and you're breathing like crazy, or do you look pretty calm? What's your sweat rate? Are you sweating a lot? Are you drenched? Is your t-shirt sticking to you because you're soaking wet, or do you look relatively calm? I think there's other ways that, for us specifically with our athlete population, how many Latin Americans we have here, getting a GPS on them was a big step for us. That heart rate for them would be probably maybe the next step, but it wouldn't give us enough value in return, that specific metric, for us to justify paying for it. Does that make sense? But yeah, there's other ways that we've tried to incorporate monitoring that during the training session. Yeah.
And you guys make these questions every session across the week.
The RP, yeah, we'll do it after every session. PlayerData has a built-in RP thing, or feature. So after the training, you can set the time that you want it to be set. So we send a morning wellness survey right when they wake up at 7 a.m. We have a meeting at 7:30, so they should fill it out by that time. That has how well did you sleep last night, how focused you feel, how stressed are you, have you eaten breakfast, do you feel well hydrated? You can create the questions that you want, which was really nice, the ability to manipulate that how you want. We send that in the morning before the session. We'll review it in our staff meeting, find players that are outliers or players that like stick out to us. And then after the session, it'll automatically send them a post-training RP as well. So it'll have all those questions. Again, you can monitor and manage the questionnaire however you want, which is really nice. So we can do a morning one and a post-match and or post-training one as well. So, yeah. Any other questions? What's up?
So are you able to generate like a live report to have like in-match feedback to make decisions off of?
Yeah, that is, I think, a feature of the live tracking.
So we
Go
have
ahead.
live tracking now. Carly's not using it at Atlanta, just because she's managing a lot of teams to see live. The new live data device, Jill just started using it, but I don't actually think we have anybody in here who's using it. But another beauty of that is you also don't sync. So you just turn the device off before the game, you set your start, and then you can see all of these metrics live at any time. And then after the game, you just hit end session. And every single person, every player will get their data on their phone. You guys will have your data on your phone. There's no like download step when you use the live data device. It helps you check. There's other things in the app that coaches use, like average formation and like heat maps of where players are and some other things that a lot of people like to track at halftime. But yeah, we do have a live data device. It's new, it just came out.
Yeah, just to go off that, there's another feature that we've been using a lot, especially with GA Cup and me not being able to go to a bunch of places, is there's an auto substitution feature for every match. So you just basically press the start of the match. You can do what the starting lineup is, and then it'll track that data through the match. And they've come up with an algorithm where everything that they capture is based on XY coordinates in a set certain area, so on the field. So as soon as you step off the field, and your data goes below a certain amount for a certain extended time. Like if you step off the field to take a throw in, it's still gonna capture your data. But if you step off the field to leave and sub out, then it will record that as a substitution. So you can automatically see when you make the match report who got subbed at certain minutes, which is very helpful for me and for our coaching staff and our executives to see, did our top prospects play 90 minutes? Did they get subbed after 70? Was it because they were injured? Were they playing bad? Were they too tired? Different things like that. So the auto substitution has been really, really huge for us as well.
Like a lot of our clubs use that for things like IDPs, like how much minutes did my kid play.
Yeah.
not play, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's helpful. And then after the overview, you'll get an individual breakdown, which I'm assuming you already knew. This is just basically all of our players, what they achieved for total distance, their high speed, their sprint, and then everything else, which are the main major metrics that we saw in the overview, just to break down for individuals. So you can see Eric had a pretty killer session. Jacob was a little bit lower, seemed like it may be a little bit of a walk in the park for him. Noble barely sprinted relative to the rest of the team. Noble sprinted 100 meters. The guy who plays the same exact position, Matthias, sprinted almost 500 meters. So just very, very simple comparisons that are very easy just to scan your eyes down the row. Okay, Matthias did a lot. Noble didn't really do that much. Is Noble injured, or did he just not want to run today? Probably was the latter. Steven, 300. So it's very easy just to scan your eye up and down the row. Who did a lot? Who did a little? Why is that? Do we need to make modifications, or is that just naturally the player's tendency? The next one that has been really fun for us is the player comparison feature. So this came up actually previously in our last conversation. We were trying to figure out as a staff which player should we play against Philadelphia Union, which as we know is a very, very transitional direct team. We anticipated there was going to be a large amount of high-speed running. So looking at our most intense training session that we had from high-speed running, this was the player comparison breakdown. Noble had 10 sprints with an average of almost 800 meters of high-speed running. Javi had 300 with 4 sprints. The player that I'm relying on against Philadelphia Union physically is going to be Noble. That's the guy that I would pick. Something else that our U17 head coaches use in terms of parent conversation, which I'm sure all of you very much encounter very often, is we had this at J-Cup. One mom called our head coach right after the match. Hey, why did you pull my player out of the game? I thought he was doing really well. You know, he created so many chances, yada, yada. You guys are more familiar with that than I am, how those conversations go. He went into it. He picked the 2 players that he wanted to compare. This guy he pulled off with the guy that he subbed in for him, and their data was nowhere near comparable. The player that he subbed in physically exerted a lot more, covered a lot more ground for us, sprinted a lot more, and overall had a way better game. He just took a screenshot of that and sent it to the mom, basically was his response, and that's all she got. So I'm sure there's probably better ways to handle that, but that's how we use this comparison feature. And we can use it among many other ways. For us, it's really big for roster choices. Who are we going to pick on the weekend? How are we reviewing the match? Who do we want to compare? Things like that. So it's very, very helpful. And lastly, just looking at the weekly load reports, this is something that I think is one of the best features that they have to offer, because my job in the most simplistic terms truly is done by this one graph. How much did our players do this week? Do we need to modify them for next week? Did they have a really, really hard week? Did they have a really easy week? So you can see, kind of scanning your eyes down the row, you can pick out how many players you want for whatever time period you want. So you can look at the past week, the past 2 weeks, the past 2 months, the past 6 months. You can look at where every player is related to each other, and that's how we're able to make decisions for the next week. Do we need to modify somebody in training? Did someone do extra work that we're not aware of that they had their pod on for? Is a player who is this guy named Matt Edwards, was he in return to play, and what did he do that week in his return to play? Matt had 6K where everyone else is around 31, 32 average. Kareem only did 22K, whereas Eric Centeno did 33. Where was the breakdown there? Where did we maybe miss overloading Eric and maybe didn't give enough work to Kareem? Everything that we want to know as a staff can pretty much be summed up in this single report. So.
Right, I bet people in here will have kids coming back from like summer break and playing in college, or kids in the East LA, the kids go play high school season, they have no idea what happens, then they come back and start training.
Yeah.
Like how would you think about managing that, like return to training basically?
Yeah, for sure. I think like one of the easiest things is every player can have their pod. You guys have individual charging docks? Yeah. You do. So every player, we obviously have a team basis, but every player will have their pod. All they have to do is download the data, and they can make a training session on their own, and then you can track their data through the entire season. We actually have a really high compliance with that, mainly because our players just want to see their data. They really just want to see what they do because they're so proud of it, which is great for us and has been incredible buy-in. Every player has their own account. They can see all of their data on their phone. It's perfect, and it's really simple, like I just showed, of how to make a training session report that I've had players go in and make training session report when they didn't need to. And they just want to see their data. And I'll explain to them in our academy meetings, how to make a training session report. If you want to see your data, it should already be in the training session, but if you're doing outside work, the pod is yours. Wear it, charge it, and upload the session. You can see everything you're doing, and that gives us a really easy way to track them. That's been a really big thing for us as we've started to do more IDP sessions in the afternoon with our players. They'll just come in and grab their pods without me knowing. I'll have no idea of it, but they're so fascinated by it, and it's so easy for them to understand. They're like, oh, perfect. I can see my data whenever I want. And then mainly they want to know what was my max speed. That's like the biggest question that we always get. But it's very, very simple, especially in players that are going to a college environment, doing extra work, maybe in their return to play phase, just for them to make their own session. Then you can check in and see, okay, what did Remy do today? What did Caden do today? What did John do today? Whatever that looks like for you guys in your environment. It's really easy to do, and something that we've had our players do a lot of. Yeah. Any other questions? Taka, what's up?
I know you're a professional of this, but as a coach, what is the simplest thing that we can apply to that data to translate to the sessions?
Translate to the sessions? Yeah. I would say the easiest one is how hard do you want your session to be? Really easiest one. Like the most session today, a medium session or a large session in terms of how hard it is. Light, medium, or hard. You'll be able to see on matches how hard a match is. You'll be able to see when you upload the data for a match, typically it's around 10K based on the age. So if 10K was a match for us and today's session was 8K, it's a pretty hard session. Other sessions you might have 3K, it's a pretty light session. So I think overall just looking at what is it related to a match, and once you have a match you'll have that data and be able to see, okay, was today a hard day or a light day? And then also too, another big one for our coaches when I first got here was training monotony. We did the same thing every single day. The data literally was a flat line if you look at it on a chart. Like we did the same thing every day. So looking at what days can we have hard days, what days can we have light days, when are our matches, how do we need to prepare, you know, any type of way for what we want to do that day tactically, I think is important. So yeah, I would say the biggest thing is just tracking how hard your training sessions are by looking at how much distance you covered, how much high speed running you covered, stuff like that. Yes?
What happens to the data from the whole platform that's tracking all this? Will you import it to PlayerData?
When we had our previous, so we, PlayerData ended up basically running it through their system to account for the less than 1% error. They basically translated all of that data into the new data, so we were able to longitudinally keep all of it. So we have all of our historical data from our previous competitor. Yeah. Anyone else? You're good?
I'm going to come up and bring Buddy too.
You're good.
We have a couple questions, so
You're
we'll do that, and then we'll have some lunch, and you guys can actually see it and try it out.
Scientist with PlayerData now. Prior to that, though, I've worked exclusively in team sport. Recently with San Diego Wave and the NWSL for the last 2 years, is once they started with expansion. Prior to that, I was with the senior women's national team in U.S. soccer under Don Scott as her assistant performance, and then also spent 5 years collegiately at the University of Oklahoma. So cool, kind of full circle, is I actually had some camps with Carly when she was a player. So now to like see her on the other side of it is really cool.
Yeah. And Buddy, you want to talk about what you do at PlayerData? Like you mostly work with clubs, so not necessarily the Atlanta United's the...
Really what we're trying to do within the sports science department is kind of be able to create a resource if clubs or teams don't have that resource of a sports scientist kind of with them full time. So within our department is we'll reach out, we'll try to set up educational resources with you and also go over the data that you collect. One, just make sure, hey, what are your data principles? Are you collecting relevant data? Is it accurate? Does it fit what you're trying to answer? And then we kind of go into a more of a deeper dive from the progression of, hey, do you want to break down weekly loading schemes? Or like talking it asks of like, what's a simple way to look is, hey, this is how we can really look at load. Here's how we can apply it. Now we've got a good grasp on that. Let's graduate to a next phase if we have the resource to cut some segments, create segments, form a drill library. So then you as your club kind of have a standard progression within that. And most times, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, are you training more than 3 times a week from actual training? It's usually 3 sessions, multiple matches maybe on the weekend, is what can we look at within those 3 days that we train? Does that help us prepare for our match load? And at the back end, are we also making sure that we're not overloading our players or underloading our players. And so that's something within our department of player data that we're really trying to get across and make sure that, hey, data is easy to use and stuff, and the more you feel comfortable with it, the more you're going to apply it and understand it.
There has to be like a lot of coaches trainings for clubs. And
Educational,
Parents training is probably the number one thing we do.
I'd say the more holistically, like from your players to your staff to the parents, that they understand what you're looking for and what you're trying to answer, is your discussion and your communication is going to improve. And then when everybody's on the same page, you're actually going to get a big boost, a big benefit out of the data collection from what you use.
I always ask a question about like what a coach could use. What a play, like you said, players like top speed, but like what else for young players here who are all aspiring to get to a next level, or they might be at the next level? Like, why is it good for a player to have access, or why do you guys? A lot of, just for your context, some pro teams don't give players access to their data. So for these guys, like why do players like it, but also why should players have it? Yeah,
I would say it's pretty rare, especially in the pro environment, honestly, for players to see their data. That is something that we as a club, it's their work. It's their work, and if they want to see their work, no problem. We have really no secrets here in how we go about things. That's how proud we feel of our work and wanting to share with people, so we feel the same way towards players. So if they want to see their data, no problem. The players are so interested specifically in their max speed and their total distance, or how many miles they ran. This one is converted to meters for my sake, but you can also convert it to miles in the app if that's better for you. And that's really all they want to see. Oh, I ran 7 miles in the game. Oh my God, that's amazing. And they are just so fascinated. Oh, your max speed is 7.5? Mine's 7.6. And they just get so excited by those things. And so for them, it increases their buy-in so much, because all they want to do is beat each other with their data. That's really all they want to do. I have had no less than I could count, or no more than I count on my hands, the amount of times that a player's come ask me like, oh, what's his max speed? What's my max speed? How much did he do in the game? How much did I do in the game? That's all they want to know. And it's so cool for us, because for a club that before we used PlayerData had an extreme amount of hardship getting buy-in from the players to wear their GPS units, it's not now. The guys love wearing them, and it's never a struggle for us. One, they can barely feel it. They can see all of their data right after training, and it's the biggest competitive edge for them, because all they want to do is see how they did compared to their teammate. Now there's educational pieces to that, right? That's important for us of, oh yeah, well, you know, your press was bad, that's why you had to run 100 yards the other way, right? There's pieces of that we can layer in, but for the bare minimum, it's such a cool thing for them just to understand and see just physically how their bodies are working. And for them to see over time, like, I started the season doing 10K in a game, but now I'm doing 13K in a game. Like, oh, I must be getting fitter. Like, that's pretty cool. And them seeing, when they start with us at U13 all the way to the twos, we'll do presentations with the players of like, look at your physical progression. This is where you started and this is where you are now. Like, that's amazing. And so seeing just the buy-in they have and just how much joy they get out of it, honestly, of seeing how much better they are than other players, is like cool for us.
Yeah. Just to touch on that, I mean, Carly mentioned buy-in is, within my experience, it also helps us as a practitioner and maybe as a coach, is if that player has buy-in and they want to get higher, they always want to do more. Oftentimes we have players that want to just do more and more and more. That's not always beneficial. So then being able to kind of explain to them, I think, and then they trust the data, it's easy to then say, hey, you need to just back off today. You look at what you did Tuesday, we know there's going to be a cost to that high intensity session. It's okay to back off Wednesday. Nothing's going to happen with your fitness level. We're just adjusting the load to ultimately help you perform best on the weekend, and that's what we all want. So it just kind of helps collectively everybody understand the process of what you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
When you think about a lot of people in here, is there a question?
Yeah, just real quick, you know, we as youth club environment people have to sell this on two sides of the fence, right? The parent side as well as the coaches and the director side. Yeah. I think the parent side is an easy one, to your point, all those matrices that they love, the kids love, that's an easy one. The part that I like is the weekly recap. For us as coaches, as you look at those numbers of the different metrics, what do you determine on what are the variables or the thresholds that I need a day off? Because we're all going to train 3 to 4 days a week, and then 2 games on the weekend. And that data is great, but you know, my education piece means I need to know what to look for to say, all right, I need to have a late day today or
absolutely.
Do you want to start that one, and then Buddy, you can talk about how we help? people figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say just talking, and again, not going too much into detail about the physical side and obviously all the rabbit holes we can go on that. The time that you need a day off is the time after you're gonna have your hardest session, always. Because you have to allow the body to recover from something hard before it can do something hard again. So if I run a marathon one day, it's very unfair of my coaches to expect me to run a marathon the next day, or even half a marathon if a marathon is a big stretch for me. So I think looking again at whatever your match averages are, I would say, generally speaking, based on your athlete population, anything above 5K, 5,000 meters is going to be a hard day for most players. That is kind of our threshold on every team of when we start to enter, oof, we should maybe back off the next day. Like, ooh, maybe we should take it a little bit lighter. That is the easiest probably metric for us and easiest cap of we can see, okay, we should like press the brake a little bit here and allow them to recover. So I would say definitely after games, obviously, but then looking at the data and seeing if you know a game and your level is 8K or 7K and we did 5K today, that's 80% of a game that we did in one day. So like everything obviously needs to be related to the game, and how that's the one thing we're preparing our players for always is a match. That's the hardest thing we're ever gonna have them do, hopefully. So working off that is going to be probably, I would say, the most important way for you to determine how we're doing. And if players show up to training as well, I think reading, like you said, kind of the internal response of the players. If I show up to training after a day that we only did 4K and they are exhausted, I would say, okay, let's just modify today a little bit and how we need to, which I know you guys, I'm sure, all do. But I think for us, just recognizing anytime something goes above 5K, 6K in terms of total distance, that's a very easy kind of standard point to use, I would say, is the easiest way. But anything after a hard session, obviously they'll need a day off.
And Buddy, we'll just quickly go on one more question. I think will be helpful, but Buddy, go ahead.
And Carly's already done a good job of kind of following up is when she touched on the weekly load. So initially, I think that's the great piece to kind of work back from, because really when you start, you need to understand the capacity of where your team is at. You're at where you're at. So you can have kind of this expectation we should be here, but if we're in reality here, we may not be able to kind of keep at the level of training. So how do we adjust from that? And that's like, let's figure out early on, what is our weekly load? How do we progress kind of in a 5 to 10% window? And as you build on that, then it's easy to work back from that you don't exceed kind of jumping 15% or 20% at a time of that weekly load. Mm-hmm. PlayerData is innovating with a metric that we're coming out with, workload. So other companies have some sort of a player load. It's based on what PlayerData is doing is taking total distance from a volume standpoint, as we know volume impacts. We know intensity from high intensity running, sprint distance, accels, decels. And we're using a standardized scaling to baseline an individual's workload essentially. So after 28 days, a player will have a baseline, and if you're within your baseline, your score, your workload should be 0. You're at baseline. Depending on if you have a high intensity session, if you're kind of 1 to 3 within that, almost in a z-score of a standard deviation, or minus 1 to 3, you're doing okay. A match, you're likely going to jump above that, kind of 6, 7, 8, 9. We know that should be the hardest of the session. So if we're looking at workload, and within a week I have a player do a 3, a 4, a 5, and 6, likely I'm not giving them enough recovery on the back end of that. So it's kind of like, hey, we had our hardest session, usually a match. How do we then go about our workload or our training in the next 2 weeks? Should it be baseline? Should it be just under baseline to make sure that we're recovered? If we're conversely hitting kind of a minus 5 and minus 6, we're likely underloading at the same time, which then we're just up and down too much. We're not kind of keeping that good ebb and flow with our loading.
And I would say, like, PlayerData, some of you in the room that are our customers know that we're here to serve. We serve the club space. Like Carly we'll never take the first team here in Atlanta. Like, we'll take 2 teams down. We care about clubs. A lot of our clubs don't have a Carly, and they definitely don't have a Buddy or a Carly, or both of them combined or close. So our clubs will actually, like, Buddy will get on the phone with your coaches. He'll go through after 28 days, like, what's your data look like? What are we looking for? He'll train the coaches. We have a whole team of people that trains coaches of what to look for and how to look at your data in a way that makes sense for them. Coaches have almost no time. I think, go ahead, right there.
Yes, that was kind of the question I was thinking about. So let's say the club doesn't want to do it, and let's say I want to do it. Is there a way to see a baseline of what a higher level team in the same age group does? So we can actually say, hey, look, this is what these guys do.
Yeah, so what we do is for all of our clubs, you guys all can opt in when you sign up to share anonymized data. And so we do like, this is what a U15 looks like at MLS Next. This is what a U15 looks like at ECNL. This is what a U15 looks like at NAL, you know, whatever the league might be. So you can compare against leagues. You don't want to compare yourself against the Premier League, right? Or Atlanta's top team, because that's like not realistic. You want to compare yourself against where's the next step. For our colleges in the room, like a lot of our colleges, and we've got Georgia back there, to have Joe, they will actually allow you guys to opt in to share data with the college coaches too, and they can share data back to say, here's what a D1 freshman looks like. And you guys can use that to talk to parents and clubs about that kid that always thinks they wanted to go to Georgia, and maybe they're more of a kid that should be going to Emory, right? And we help, here's what a D3, here's what a D2, here's what a D1. You guys can use that to talk to your club, and they can compare their data. Cool. We have lunch back there. I think real quick, Buddy's just gonna walk us through. We're gonna go out and do a demo. So there's gonna be a QR code up on the screen. Just go ahead and shoot it with your phone and get signed up. And we'll see a couple of volunteers, maybe 5 or 6, to stop and find Buddy to wear a unit, and we'll just kind of walk around so we can actually see what the data's like and ask questions to Buddy.
Oh shit.
Methodology, which is ultimately our director of our academy and oversees our development pyramid. His name is Javier Perez. He's here in the back. So obviously we want him to be able to know the local clubs. Obviously didn't realize some of the local colleges were going to be here as well, but we want the kids that don't turn professional in our club. We want them to have a great pathway to college. So anyways, I want to bring him down here with the local coaches being here, and at least give you guys a chance to say hello. And we're going to try to set up some meetings with him in the next couple months where you guys can get some lunch with them and actually coffee and get to know him a bit more. But anyways, Javier, welcome to the club, and we look forward to having you. Just to reiterate on the player data side, or the sports science, which Carly oversees for our development pyramid, we really rate it as far as we look at the physical metrics for our players and what does it take to get up to the first team level. And so for us, with our, what do our outside backs, and I don't know what you covered in the presentation, but what thresholds do our outside backs hit? The style of play we have, the physical nature of the MLS is probably a little bit less technical than maybe some of the leagues around the world. So we need to have the physical athletes out there. And so for us, kind of building the athlete, so to speak, building the robustness, that's where Carly can monitor. Can we continue to push? Can we continue to push? Do we need to back off? But really, we're trying to build these robust athletes that can compete at the MLS level. And then on the technical side, trying to turn them into soccer players that can actually play at that level as well. So that's kind of how we see it from a high level, the combination between the two.
Yeah. Good job.
Anything else?
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Carlos, one of the questions was, and you might be able to answer it as like a former player, coach, and all the other things you've done. Why is data important for a coach? And what do the coaches look at here, especially in the academies where they got a lot of stuff going on?
I think it's a little bit different. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm like a data first guy. You have some coaches that don't like it at all. You have some coaches that rely on it too much. And so for me, that's not a data first guy, using it as a little bit of a benchmark. And so you look with your eye, you get a feel of the player, but then, I was asking Carly about our twos game the other night where we actually got overrun by Philadelphia Union. He was talking about what was our midfield partnership? What did that look like from a physical standpoint? What did the partnership at left back and left wing look like from a metrics and a physical standpoint? So I used the data just to really kind of check myself. It looked like we got overran, and sure enough, we only did 2 sprints in our midfield out of our midfield 3, which obviously that combination is not going to cut it, right? So that then helps me, from my position, inform the coaching staff, and they themselves can see that. And it just backs up guys, this combination clearly didn't work against a physically athletic Union. Maybe if we're going to be ball dominant and a team that's not super transitional, So long story short, it helps shape our narrative where you can see it, but also it backs it up. So that's just how I like to view it with the guy that's not kind of data first.
Cool, awesome. Great, well, lunch in the back, guys. Everyone will be hanging around, so feel free to ask questions. Buddy has the QR code up here.